All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a question that, well, it's one that probably keeps every parent up at some point. And we're going to see what happens when you smash together decades of science to get one clear answer. And it's a really heavy question, right? For years, I mean years, psychological theories have basically pointed the finger straight at parents. The message was pretty clear. An anxious kid means you're doing something wrong as a parent. But here's the thing. One study says this, another study says that. It could be really confusing. So a team of researchers had a great idea. They thought, hey, what if we stop looking at these studies one by one and just combined all of them, like all the data from decades of research, all into one giant analysis? And the way they did this is with a really powerful statistical tool called a meta-analysis. You can think of it like a study of studies. They didn't do new research. They took the results from 47 separate studies that were already done, and that's a huge data set covering almost 13,000 kids. So they had one really simple question they wanted to answer. Can we put a number on it? Just how much of the difference between a really anxious kid and a not so anxious kid is actually because of their parents? Okay, so they took all this data, thousands of kids, dozens of studies, and they crunched the numbers. And what they found was, well, it was pretty shocking. It kind of turns decades of conventional wisdom on its head. 4%. That's it? That's the big number they came up with across all of these studies, all the different parenting practices you can think of. They only explained 4% of the variance in childhood anxiety. And we'll talk about what variance means in just a sec. Okay, so what is this variance thing? It's actually a pretty simple idea. Just picture a pie chart that represents all the reasons why kids might have different levels of anxiety. Variance is just asking, how big is the slice of that pie labeled parenting? And it turns out it's a tiny little 4% slice. But hold on a second. When you hear 4%, it's super easy to think, oh, okay, so parenting doesn't matter at all. But that is absolutely not the takeaway here. Not even close. The real story, the part that's actually useful for parents, is hiding in the details. So the researchers started by breaking parenting down into two really broad buckets. You've got parental control on one side, being overly involved, telling a kid what to do, what to think. And on the other side, you've got parental rejection, which is more about being cold, not showing a lot of warmth or approval. And this is where things start to get pretty interesting. When they separated those two things, they saw a little difference. Parental rejection came in at about 4%, but parental control, that was a bit higher at 6%. Now, yeah, both of those numbers are still small, but it does suggest that being overly controlling might have a slightly stronger connection to anxiety than being distant. But honestly, that's not even the main event. The real game changer in this study is what comes next. It turns out thinking about broad styles is kind of the wrong way to look at it. The secret isn't in the style. It's in the specific individual things parents do. And check this out. This is the big one. When they zoomed in on very specific actions, the picture just flips. A lack of parental warmth in general, it explained less than 1% of anxiety, practically nothing. But a lack of what they call autonomy granting, which is basically not letting your kids have their own opinions or make their own choices, that explained a massive 18%. I mean, the difference is just staggering, right? So this obviously brings up a huge question. If parenting as a whole is just that little 4% sliver, what on earth makes up the other 96%? Where's the rest of the anxiety coming from? Well, the researchers point to lots of other studies, especially studies done with twins. And that body of work suggests something pretty wild. About half of the difference in anxiety levels seems to come down to genetics. Yep, 50%. And another big chunk, about a third, comes from what scientists call the non-shared environment. That's just a fancy term for all the unique stuff that happens to one kid. Their specific friends, a particular teacher, a personal experience that their brother or sister didn't have. So what's the bottom line here? What should you actually take away from all this? It's this. We need to stop worrying so much about being a good or bad parent in some general, vague sense. Those broad labels don't really mean much here. What really matters, what actually moves the needle, are specific actions. And the single most powerful one appears to be fostering your child's independence. And really, knowing this can completely change how you think about all this. It moves us away from a place of guilt and blame and into a place of targeted, effective action. It's not about trying to be some mythical, perfect parent. It's about focusing on the small, specific things we can do to help our kids feel capable, independent, and like they have some control over their own lives. And isn't that what it's all about?